This is our situation. We have to grow along with those who, yes, travel with us in many situations of Catholic life, but perhaps are not with us entirely in soul, and we suffer as a consequence. The Lord will have the last word, however, and he is patient. With regard to one specific issue, I want to address only one point this morning, but I will head on. So if you'll bear with me, I'll quote, and you'll see where I'm coming from. It's to do with the patience of the Lord in letting the wheat, darno, tares, whatever you want to call them, zizzania in Latin, and also in Italian, grow with what is good. We, in our time, are in what should have been a springtime of the Church, when Blessed and soon-to-be Saint John the 23rd opened the windows. He was referring to the way that there would be fresh air. Yes, it happened, but alas, this other thing came in as well. But the Lord is patient. Now, there is therefore a tendency, isn't there, if we're honest, to take refuge in a comfort zone, and therefore to refuse all. Now, that is something that we need to be aware of as a position which can limit us in our experience of grace, and also our way of looking at other people who are tabernacles of the Most High and have their message for us. Let us look first of all at what happened. I remember the years. We were young at the time, and initially there was a feeling that there would be huge renewal and dynamism and so on. And then very quickly we realized what was happening. People were using what was given as an invitation to be mature, to be big children. And the result very quickly was that from the glorious heritage that we had received from 2 millennia, we had Darwin, we had the shoddy. Now, a good example of both growing together is a volume like this, which you'll find all over the place. It's Catholic Hymns, Old and New. You'll find in such a volume very high praise, like Newman's Lead Kindly Light, or a good translation of the Liturgy of St. James, the hymn, Let All Mortal Flesh Keep Silence. Mystical, poetically noble, and theologically profound. And then, what will you find? Alongside, perhaps on the same page, you'll find this kind of thing. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I shall begin. The Lord said to Noah, there's gonna be a floody. Lord said to Noah, there's gonna be a floody. Get those children out of the muddy, children of the Lord. And on it goes for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hymns, strophe verses, all in the same Afro-Caribbean mode. And about a quarter, a good quarter actually, is not exactly that bad, but not far off it. And unfortunately, even those who have come through the deluge of these hymns have been eviscerated of anything containing the word man, men, or anything of that nature, even he in it. So the great poets have been tampered with. Just this week, I was investigating a few very profound, and I found very helpful, YouTubes on the monastic life in the East, notably Mount Athos. And although it's very difficult, they have managed to get a few clips of the worship there and also the spirituality behind it by interviewing a few living saints. And the difference makes the angels weep. High praise of something incomprehensible compared with matiness, clappiness, noisiness, ugliness and shoddiness. And because everyone is doing the same, we think we're the odd one out. Well, my friends, we're not the odd ones out. If we feel something about where we're coming from, we're in the majority, because a few years is nothing compared with 2 millennia. There is another thing too. Anything that pertains to God has to be somehow approached on tiptoe. There is a danger sometimes, even in our daily talk, to joke about the sacred. It's something which is on the borderline of morally permissible, because there are things which, in the religious life and so on, we know we tend to somehow creep into it. But when it comes to a point of actually handling the things themselves, it's difficult then to get back into that mode of fear and trembling, because a few minutes earlier one has brought it into the banal. Now, one day, this is actually in England, years ago now, I was at that time serving the altar in a monastery in the south of England. And I noticed there, because it had a huge amount of ceremony, that was creeping in. And not only was it creeping in regularly in conversation, but it was creeping in also into the sanctuary itself. And I thought, this is different. I remember presenting the thurible to somebody at the altar, and the celebrant muttered something, "Is pretty John strike or something?" Now, do you see what was happening there? He was forgetting what he was doing. In the old rite, every gesture is accompanied with a prayer. And when it comes to the blessing of the incense at the offertory, it's quite long. Now, there is in the old rite a huge fellow feeling with this mountain of prayer in the East, which hasn't changed, that we do not tamper with the majesty that made us. He is bigger than we are, and crushingly great. And if we start to do that, my friends, we're getting a shock. Not in this world, perhaps, but in purgatory. Because God has the last word. And if we think we can get away with shoddiness for our God, we've got to face the consequences. The same applies to the short change that God has had on earth in certain countries, notably Ireland. That by now, if people are in church for more than half an hour on a Sunday, they start to look at their watches. What's happened? Compare that with the entry into mode, which actually we're doing in this celebration, and which all our fathers would have done in any celebration of the sacred mysteries, at least the solemn one. They would have been very close to that mystique of the unhurried East, where one does not crash in and out of eternity, but enters into the spirit of what they call hesychia, silence. The language of the Blessed Trinity is silence. And if we come into a noisy mode, we are clapping out our God and clapping out our intimacy with Him. So I'd invite you, my friends, be patient. If we think we're in the minority, perhaps one day God will have a good word for us, and not so for all those who have sown